Yes, long as the people got something to say.
It's time for Globally Speaking with your host, Christopher Bennett. Heard every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 12 noon Central Standard Time, right here on globalnewsforum.com. And now, your host, Mr. Christopher Bennett.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Christopher Bennett, and you're listening to Globally Speaking on globalnewsforum.com. Listened every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I am also the author of Daddy Doesn't Want to Dance Anymore, which can be found on my website at www.christopherlbennett.com. But right now, you're listening to the one host with 7 billion plus voices, coming to you live every week on Saturday. Today, we will be discussing part 2 to the African American family. May you rest in peace. But first, I would like to go over some world issues that's going on this past week that I would like to share with you here on Globally Speaking, because of course you know I am the one voice representing 7 billion voices around the world. And I think this is something that we should all be aware of and be in tuned. First, on the table of discussion or the news, confirmed Egyptian forces fire live ammo on protesters. With over 33 people already confirmed dead and about 1,500 injured during the Egypt's Revolution 2.0, the toll is expected to rise as police have started using live ammunition on protesters. The situation is getting worse, with protesters breaking up pavements and throwing stones at security officers. Police have been firing rubber bullets and tear gas. Some demonstrators are writing to contact details of their families on their arms so they can be identified if they're killed. People are chanting in the streets, "Down with the marshal." The head of Egypt's ruling Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. People are carrying protesting signs saying, "Obey the will of the people or Egypt will burn." The crowd is demanding the ruling military generals to step down. They believe that one dictator in Mubarak was replaced with another, the army, which has been in control since February. People are saying they want the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces to step down because they are the ones really in charge. Egypt military rulers have completely failed to live up to their promises to Egyptians to improve human rights and have instead been responsible for a catalog of abuses which in some cases exceed in records of Mubarak, Amnesty International said in a new report. So, what we're hearing is a second revolution going on in Egypt as we speak. It's funny that this revolution that Egypt is experiencing is a more volatile revolution. The police or the armed forces are taking more aggression towards the people as opposed to the last rebellion. And the funny thing about this situation as well is Egypt's military is taking notes from the police departments here on occupied Wall Street. So, just let that marinate for a second. What we're seeing right now being played out is that now Egypt armed forces is taking a more of aggressive approach towards its people in this current revolution. And they're taking it right out of the books of what they see going on here in the United States with Occupy Wall Street. The same country, mind you, that preaches human rights and democracy. Sound like hypocrisy if you ask me. On to the next story. Whiff of mustard in the new U.S. allegations on Iran. If you're ready for some BS, here we go. American allegations against Iran are rising by the day. The latest addition is the suggestion that the Islamic Republic supplied artillery shells of chemical weapons stockpiled by the Gaddafi regime. The discovery of the stockpile shells tip with high toxic mustard gas was reported by rebel fighters in Libya. Rebel fighters in Libya, the same rebel fighters that we have no idea who they are. We have heard many accusations that these rebel fighters of Libya have ties to Al-Qaeda. Just want to keep you abreast. In Libya, the Washington Post cites a number of sources are saying that while the chemical itself was produced locally, the shells must have been supplied by a third country, Iran. We are pretty sure we know the shells were custom designed and produced in Iran for Libya. The newspaper quotes an unnamed source in the U.S. government as saying, crackhead, the report does not state the act of supplying shells, if it happened at all, violated by any obligations undertaken by either Iran or Libya, but goes on to mention Iran's controversial nuclear program, which the West, crackheads, the West, says has a secret military purpose. Sounds like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Get this. Mustard gas is a toxic chemical used as a weapon during World War I. It has been largely replaced by more dangerous agents in line with technological advances. It was also used by both Iraq and Iran during their war in the 1980s. Iran has since signed the Chemical Weapons Convention and agreed to destroy the entire stockpile of chemical weapons that was done under the supervision of international inspectors. Let me read this again to you, just so you can understand the lies and deceptions that we are experiencing currently right now. Iran has since signed the Chemical Weapons Convention and agreed to destroy the entire stockpile of chemical weapons. This was done under the supervision of international inspectors. So these inspectors saw Iran destroy these chemical weapons. However, right now as we speak, Iran's supposed to be having these weapons on hand and ready to use against their people. Once again, let's go right back to weapons of mass destruction. Remember that lie? Remember that hoopla that was built around this lie to justify going into Iraq? It's funny how history repeats itself, which goes on to, if you don't know your history, you won't know your future. If you don't know your past, you won't know your future. This is the same situation. Let's dwell on the past for a minute so we won't repeat the same future in which we have seen over the years, recent years. On with the story. Tehran has been under investigation, extensive diplomatic fire for several months now. In September, the U.S. accused the Iranian leadership of conspiring to assassinate a Saudi ambassador in Washington. The Islamic Republic called the allegations absurd, but Washington and some of its allies, crackheads, used sanctions against Iranian officials over the alleged plot. Meanwhile, a controversial report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, published on November 8th, implied that there are credible reasons to believe Iran is working on a nuclear device. The report was said to be sufficient justification for tougher sanctions against Tehran by the West / crackheads. Although China and Russia are skeptical over the new evidence or lack of thereof in the IAEA report. Let me repeat that last line, because as I go on to the next two stories, I'm going to tell you how dots connects here. Tougher sanctions against Iran is passed by the West / crackheads. That's European nations, the EU, along with America, along with Israel, all of these jokers, crackheads that's been pretty much bankrupt right about now. However, China and Russia are skeptical over these new evidence or lack of thereof. So both China and Russia ain't falling for it. Maybe they have reasons. Maybe as I go on to report these next 3 stories I have in front of me, probably can understand why China, along with Russia, is not going along with the BS that we're hearing here regarding Iran.